John, among other issues that we were made aware of was you had an issue when Nikiwe Bikisha left. You wanted to be part of the negotiations for her successor.
And I never expected it would be my decision, but I did expect to be part of the conversation. The management took a different view, and I made my own decisions. I left without a job. I didn't leave to go anywhere. No, it was hugely gratifying, that people said that I'd made a contribution, that I would be missed, and people were unhappy about the idea that there might be some kind of political interference in the work of journalists at the SABC.
For someone who doesn't understand what is Afropolitan, from someone who worked there, what is Afropolitan?
I had a lot to learn because that's not my background. The idea was to embrace the urban African population that was at the core of Kaya. Often the ad industry looks at the person who goes home and slaughters an animal in celebration or in any other context. And then they think there's another person who is interested in traveling overseas, learning about wine, learning about investing in the stock market. And he said, these are the same people. But the Afropolitan has rural roots, has traditions, looks backward, but looks backward in ways that are linked to the way they want to move forward.
Dr. John, good evening and welcome to the Media Pod.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. John, tell us briefly about your upbringing and tell us about who John Perlman is.
So I'm a Joburg boy. I was born in 1959. I grew up in the northwest of the city in the suburb of Northcliffe. Basically, I've lived in Johannesburg all my life, except for a period in the United States for 1 year, and I lived in London 2 different times for about 3 years. But I've never lived anywhere else in South Africa. So Joburg is my home. Joburg is very much part of my roots. Youngest child in a family of 4. My father was a doctor, general practitioner, used to go and visit people in their homes, old style doctor. My mom was involved in social kind of endeavors. She was head of something called Operation Hunger, which people might have heard about. Grew up loving football, not being very good at it. Grew up not liking school and being very good at it. So I was always trapped between what I liked and what I was good at. But yeah, and I had an interesting life as a young boy.
Tertiary, where did you go to tertiary?
I went to Wits, and I did 4 years at Wits. I did a year in London, a higher diploma in journalism at the City University of London.
And then why are they calling you that John? Is it because you did Sesotho at Wits?
So I don't really know how it started, but it started when I was at Kaya FM. And I think one listener just called me that. And it might be because probably I was older than the person calling in.
Yes.
And then it just seemed to catch on.
In terms of broadcasting, was commentary your first shot at the media landscape?
So it depends what you mean by media landscape. So before that, I was a print journalist. That's where I got my foot in the door.
In terms of broadcasting, let me be specific, yes.
Okay. So I did some reporting on football for 702. I would go to matches on the weekend, PSL games. I think it was called the NSL in those days.
NSL.
Yeah, and I would give a report, and I'd phone in and I'd say, Swallows played Sundowns today and they did this and that, and whatever. Then in 1990, basically with all of my own money, I went to cover the World Cup in Italy. And because I was putting in my own money...
1994, I remember it.
Yeah, 1990.
Italy 90 years.
Yes, I had to do as much work as I could. So I did radio crossings for 702 and for Capital Radio. And I think that sort of got me a little bit into the broadcasting space, and I really enjoyed it. The commentary began, I can't even remember when, but a couple of years after that. And my first work as a commentator was to work with Roy Bailey. Roy became the comments man, giving the analysis, and I was the person who did the describing the game for the viewers.
More like an analyst.
Yeah, so Roy was the analyst. I was describing. I was the commentator. And I remember the first time I did commentary, nobody told me the producer would be talking in the background. And I thought, what is going on here? Who are these people? Well, I knew who they were, but I thought, are they ever going to shut up? I was really quite thrown.
You have to commentate and listen at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, they talk, but they're not only talking to you, they're saying, camera four, give me the Chiefs bench.
Those are the directors.
Yeah, coming to 4, on 4. And all this is going on while you're trying to do your work. So that took some getting used to.
Back in those days, how were you guys preparing for matches?
So I think I was following the game closely in those days, so that was part of the preparation. Mark Gleason was a great guy for generating statistics for the team, and he did it brilliantly, so he helped take care of that. If I was covering, particularly when we started playing international football, and there were a lot of players I didn't know, I'd always go to a practice session, and I would sit there and I would find somebody from the other team. For example, we went to Australia, I think in 1993, if I'm not mistaken, or early 94. And I found somebody there and I said, listen, I need your help for the next hour. I want to be able to pick those Australian players just by looking at them. So I'd say, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And then you would stay there for as long as it took you to be able to judge the person by their build, maybe their haircut, the way they run and stuff like that. So there's a lot of preparation, I must say.
Do you remember why you left commentary for radio, like SAFM?
I don't think the one happened because of the other, because while I was at SAFM, I was still doing commentary. But, if I'm absolutely honest, commentary left me because, they said, we don't need you anymore.
True.
Yeah, and I think they made a very good judgment. I think it was a fair decision. I don't feel badly done by. I wasn't doing it as well as I could, as well as I should. There were up-and-coming young people, hungrier than me. I was very involved with my radio job. And, I wouldn't say I got fired, but we parted ways.
Between doing radio and doing commentary, which one do you enjoy it most? I know you're still doing radio even now, as in presenting, but between commentary and being a talk show host, which one are you enjoying most?
No, I think also by the time I stopped doing commentary for the SABC, and I enjoyed it, by the way, and I have the SABC to thank for so many things, giving me my first real break in broadcasting. But no, I think I knew talk radio was where I wanted to be, because I was never ever just interested in football. Even when I was a print journalist, I was writing about lots of other things. I've always been interested in politics. In many ways, my interest in football came from, apart from the fact that I absolutely love the game, but it came from my interest in football's place in South African society. Because I started going to watch games in Soweto in the late 1970s, when I was a teenager. Long before I even had a car or access to transport, so it was a world that fascinated me, but ultimately talk radio was what I wanted to do.
And then you left SABC.
Yeah.
It created a nightmare for SABC. What happened?
I don't know if, I'm not sure in what way it created a nightmare for them, because they carried on and I carried on. But look, there was an issue. So when I say we, myself and other people particularly in our team at SAFM, felt that there had been a blacklist created where certain commentators couldn't be on air. And we felt that was against the SABC's code. There was a thing where I interviewed Kaiser Khanyago, who was head of communications then, and I made clear on air that I thought that what they were saying about the blacklist not existing was not true. And, after that, I think it's fair to say things would never be the same again. But I felt the SABC always treated me well, you know. I felt I said what I had to say, but I remained on air. They never fired me, which some people think is amazing, you know, that I brought the broadcaster to some extent into disrepute. There was a commission of inquiry headed by Zwelakhe Sisulu that made certain findings. But I think, you know, eventually there had to be a parting of the ways and I left.
But that commission, the recommendations, were they fully implemented at the time?
You know, I can't even remember. I mean, I think the sticking point was that they said there should be no disciplinary, or rather the SABC decided there should be no disciplinary action against anyone, which I didn't agree with. I felt there should be disciplinary action, and I felt that could include me. I didn't want to be exempt from it, but I thought there should have been some steps taken. But yeah, it's water under the bridge for me, and when I look back on life at the SABC, I can't begin to describe how much I learned, you know, from being at SAFM. I was there for 9 years. And whenever I speak to like journalism schools or whatever, and they ask me to talk about my career, and they say, you know, should one work at the SABC? And I say, yes, you must. You know, there's nothing like it in the country. It's the public broadcaster. You can work in so many different languages. And the most rich thing about it was the people there. The people from rural KZN, and they're Afrikaners from small town Free State, and there's me, and there's another 100 people who are nothing like me. It's a great melting pot.
John, among other issues that we were made aware of was you had an issue when Nikiwe Bikisha left. You wanted to be part of the negotiations for her successor. We've got a lot of young and up-and-coming presenters who are listening to us, watching us on a daily basis. Why is that important? So that as a team, you need to understand the dynamics of the team and the segments. Why was that important for you to be part of that discussion?
So I think if you're going to work with somebody on air, you should at least be part of the conversation. I never expected it would be my decision, but I did expect to be part of the conversation. The management took a different view, and you know, I made my own decisions.
Kosadu and Trevor Manuel, when you left SABC, Kosadu one day took the full page. Just on your last day, and Trevor spoke highly of you. Yeah. As an individual, how did that make you feel?
No, it was incredible. Look, by the way, I was a COSATU member. So, you know, they also, I was in the Communication Workers Union, and, you know, I always enjoyed being part of a union. So they, you know, I can't remember the name of the shop steward for our, or the union rep for SABC, but, you know, they came and we spoke and so on. No, it was hugely gratifying, you know, that people said that I'd made a contribution, that I would be missed, and people were unhappy about the idea that there might be some kind of political interference in the work of journalists at the SABC. But that's an old battle, and it's a battle that's carried on, you know, carried on long after me. But no, it was fantastic. I mean, all these people saying, we wish you wouldn't go. I mean, you have to be appreciative of people standing up for you in that way.
True that. Looking back at your last show at SAFM, especially on after the debate, what did you learn from that?
You know, I was quite nervous for that last show because I wasn't sure how I would feel. But it went really well and went really smoothly. And then in the last hour, we just shot the breeze, you know, and spoke about things that we'd done on air, and listeners called in. And yeah, as farewells go, it's as good as it gets.
And then you disappeared, and then you went to Kaya. Yeah. I think it was Greg and Neil there. How did that happen?
So, I mean, it didn't take all that long. Look, there were two things happening to me when I left. First of all, I left without a job. I didn't leave to go anywhere. I planned to do two things. The one is I knew I wanted to get back into broadcasting, and I'll explain that in a moment, how that came about. But I was also wanting to start a non-profit organization, which ended up being called the Dreamfields Project. With the World Cup coming to South Africa, I wanted to be involved in some kind of initiative that would spread the love and the joy and the resources and the benefits to kids, and in particular rural kids, but also township kids as well. So I in fact, even before I'd left the SABC, was starting to work on this thing. I thought it would be something I could do while I was at the SABC. But then I left and started trying to raise money for this project, which is now in its 17th year. I don't know if you want to hear about it, but we've got, about 80,000 kids. We work in around 400 schools. We play football, we play netball, we've started doing athletics. And so that was going on. But I was looking for radio work, and I went to Neil and said, have you got a place for me? What I have in mind is 1 hour of radio, one topic. In other words, taking what was the After 8 debate at SFM and making it a single 1 hour show. And from that, I had very complicated ideas for the title, and Neil just said, Today with John Perlman, keep it simple. And I was there for 13 years. And Kaya, I've been so blessed with the places I've worked, but Kaya was fabulous.
Just when we were about to leave Kaya for 702, the Afropolitan theme was phasing out. Mm-hmm. For someone who doesn't understand what is Afropolitan, from someone who worked there, what is Afropolitan?
Sure, this is going to be a bit embarrassing. My understanding of the idea was to embrace the urban African population that was at the core of Kaya in all its many, many, many and rich manifestations. And one thing Greg Maluka did that was really brilliant, he produced these timelines showing what music were people listening to when Kaya started, what were they wearing, what were the TV shows, and so on. And I remember Greg, I can't remember the context, but I think we were talking to the ad industry. And he said often the ad industry looks at the person who goes home and slaughters an animal in celebration or in any other context. And then they think there's another person who is interested in traveling overseas, learning about wine, learning about investing in the stock market. And he said, these are the same people. But the Afropolitan has rural roots, has traditions, looks backward, but looks backward in ways that are linked to the way they want to move forward. So that was my understanding, and it was a fascinating conversation. Obviously, I had a lot to learn because that's not my background. But I had, being around people like Greg and many others, it was fantastic and lots to learn.
But then the transition from Afropolitan to 702 Lenders, how was it? When you took over from Joanne?
I think first of all, I didn't move from Kaya to 702. Kaya went through a big change, and I was amongst a group of people that were retrenched, and COVID was just starting. So I moved from Kaya to nothing.
I remember 2020.
Yeah, when I say nothing, I was still doing Dreamfields, from which I was earning a half salary and so on, and I had things to do. But it was quite a choppy time in my life because COVID was already upon us. 702 is different, although the audience at 702 has changed a lot in the time I've been here. But I think Kaya had very, very, very few white listeners, whereas at 702, I am connecting in part with one part of who I am, which is the white boy who grew up in the suburbs, born in 1959, went to school, matriculated in 1976. So with that portion of the 702 audience, I enjoy connecting with that part of my past, which has got cultural references and sporting references, some things in the language we use and so on. The music references are sometimes quite fun as well. But I think at 702, this is probably the most rounded version of myself that I've ever been on air, because I can be everything. As I said, I've got that reference to my own past as a young man and a small boy. I've got the audience at 702, which has a big overlap with the audience at Kaya, urban, Gauteng, and so on. And yeah, I'm older, so I've got more to think about and say, I hope.
And then you worked for Top Sport, you worked for SABC, SAFM, and then you went to Kaya, and then you now at 702. In terms of show prep, how does one put a show together with a team of producers, technical producers, executive producer if you have, or PM? Just a show to put it on air, because what listeners consume is output.
Yes.
But there's a lot of work that is done from team members as an input.
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, there's my own personal preparation. So when I get up in the morning, I go online and I read various publications ranging from the New York Times to the Sowetan to Business Live, and so on. What I always do is I put the TV on, and I work through the channels, but I put the TV on and I put it on pause. And I bank up an hour of TV on, let's say I start with Newsroom Africa, and I'll go through that. And then I'll do the same with the SABC, and I'll bank another hour. The reason I do that is I don't want to watch everything. I don't want to sit there watching adverts, but I'll sit there and I'll go through things, go back on things, fast forward things, and so on. The team are doing their own preparation. Usually around 11 o'clock, I'll start sending them my story ideas between 11 and 12. And then we'll be in a meeting. We'll look at what the other 702 stations have done. The other 702 programs, I beg your pardon, have done. For me, I think afternoon drive is different to breakfast. I think breakfast is breaking news. A lot of the conversations are fresh, but I think at the end of the day, people maybe want to go a little bit slower. They don't necessarily want to go bang, 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 news, breaking story, all that kind of energy. I think they want to take some time digesting things. So I look for guests who can explain things. I don't feel a need to cover every single news story because I think that's been done through the day. We've got the EWN team doing bulletins and so on. And we've started doing something over the last 6 or 8 months where we do music at the end of the show.
Yes.
We have fun with that. So I think you're looking for a slightly different mix in the afternoons. I do a lot of reading, but I don't just read about South Africa. I don't just read news. I don't just read non-fiction. I read fiction as well. And I like to think that this mix of what I'm interested in allows me to bring that on air. So you wouldn't call it preparation in the specific way. I must read this to speak about that. But I like to think I've got quite a big library in my head that goes back many decades.
When you do your introduction, especially after the news, for instance, today, you started doing your ad-lib around 7 minutes past 3 until 11 minutes past 3. What I've picked up listening to your show, you give us a breakdown of what the show is all about. From the first hour, the second hour, until the last moment of the show. That helps me as a listener to be hooked.
Yeah, I hope so.
Why is that important? Because if you listen to other stations, presenters don't really care about telling us as listeners what's coming up in the show.
Well, if I think about
Or is it experience?
I think so, but I wouldn't say it's unique. I mean, if I listen to my excellent colleagues, you know, Clement Manyatela comes to mind. If you hear Clement just after 9 o'clock, he tells you exactly what you're in for. You know, he's got the open line, and he gives you a very clear picture. And you're right, because I listen to him at that opening of the show because I want to know, okay, what's he doing a little bit later? Because I'm not going to listen for 3 hours. I'm not able to do that. But I'll say, okay, well, at 10:10, I need to be back on 7:02 because Clement's got a great guest coming in and the topic is of interest. But I think it's essential. I mean, I think if you think of all media now, people driving in their cars are doing this with their middle fingers, or they are, telling their phone to change channels or whatever. People sitting in front of TV screens are moving. If it doesn't interest them, they're going to move on. So yeah, you've got to tell people, hey, listen, I've got good stuff. It's like a menu in a restaurant. People, before they sit down in a restaurant, will look there and they say, what have they got to eat? And if they don't see anything that is going to be tasty and fill them up, they'll go somewhere else. We're the same. It's competitive.
Personally, for you, do you think audience is more important than revenue, or it's vice versa, or both are?
No, I think both are very, very important. I mean, look at the SABC. Even though we were public broadcasters, there were adverts on SAFM. But certainly when I got to Kaya, and even more so at 702, revenue and doing your part to contribute to the commercial sustainability of, firstly, your station, but secondly, the company, has always been very important to me. And I'm very, very respectful of our advertisers. I'm not going to cross lines and say, oh, if I were you, I'd buy that phone or drive that car. I mean, I don't mean that in a foolish way, but they pay for my opportunity to do this incredible job. So, for example, we get quite a lot of live reads in the commercial mix, and I read them. I do my best to make them sound good, and so there's that. But you asked me about audience as well, and I think that the two do go together. I think you can offer a product that is attractive to potential sponsors and their investors in our show. And they come here because we have an audience. They come here because we have a particular audience. And it's my job, firstly, just for the integrity of the show, to be interesting. Otherwise, people go and listen to something else. And I want to know that people are listening and enjoying it and are stimulated. And what I love about talk radio is you get to connect with that, with the calls, the voice notes, the WhatsApps, and so on. I've always loved the talk element, which we didn't have in the first part of my life at SABC until we introduced the After 8 debate on the show. I never spoke to listeners, hardly.
How frequent do you go out as a team, probably led by the sales team, to clients and tell them about the features that you have on your show so that they can invest in your show?
I wouldn't be able to say how often it is. I mean, it's something we do, but I wouldn't really know. I mean, if anyone says to me, can you please come to this or that, I'll go along. But is it 5 times a year, 6? I honestly don't know.
You mentioned Clement. One thing that I've realized about Clement's show is very frequent when it comes to the change of features. Mm-hmm. What is the thinking behind that? Is it
on his show?
Yes. Is it?
You'd have to ask him.
Oh, okay. No, it's fine.
I wouldn't want to speak for.
Yes.
I'm happy to speak about his show.
Because it's something that I find very interesting because it keeps the listeners engaged time and again.
Yes,
but I will speak to him about it.
Yeah, chat to him about it.
If you listen to talk stations in the country, which is SAFM, Power, 702 and Cape Talk, they have a similar format.
Okay.
6 to 9, it's talk. 9 to 12, it's talk. And then 12 to 1, it's a midday report. All of them are the same. Do you think that, in a way, is the safest way in terms of doing radio? Because none of them is doing news. It's talk. News come top of the hour or half past, but we don't have a news station in the country. Is it because of safety, or is it because of what the consumers want or what the advertisers want?
So I don't see the news and talk distinction quite so clearly as you do. I mean, to me, the breakfast show on 702, for example, is a news and talk show. There's interviews with newsmakers, there's the news bulletins which provide you with that that set of quick hits around, okay, these are the 5, 6, 7 top stories of the day. I mean, I see what I do as a news show, but I see it as a news talk show as well. I think Clement's slightly different because Clement, let's say he's dealing with the budget. He'll go at that for 30 minutes, for example. He may even do it with one guest. And his open line is very much talk. But if there's news and breaking news that he has to weave into that, if, for example, the Minister of Safety and Security is only available, or is he police now? I forget. But if there's a newsmaker that's only available, he'll interrupt the talk and take 15 minutes with Minister X or important person Y. So I think, Rilebogile, for example, after Mandy's done with the midday report, that's very much talk, I get that. But I think when they come back to us for the drive show, I think we news and talk.
Jim, you spoke about the Dream Team. Please tell us more about it. And
Dreamfields,
Dreamfields, yes, where people can get to know about it, and those who want to assist, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so Dreamfields we launched in 2007. So I'm not going to go through all the history, but some of what we did was very much about the World Cup coming. We had lots of events. We also used to build football fields, which we stopped doing for reasons I can go into a little bit later if you want. But what we do now is we work mainly in rural South Africa. So we're in Limpopo province, we're in Northwest, we're in Mpumalanga, we're in a lot of places in KZN and so on. And the way it works in a school is each school gets an opportunity to create what we call a Dream League. Dream League is 5-a-side football and mini netball, and every kid who wants to play can play. They play at the school. They play from the beginning of the school year, we hope, as far as they can until exams become a thing. The way we support them is we give them equipment to play footballs. Every school gets a full set of kit. They get bibs to play. They get small goalposts. They get netball poles. We provide coaching workshops for teachers. But what we've also been doing the last 5 years is we hire what we call community coaches. They're unemployed young people who are looking for something to do. They all live close to the school in working distance, and they run the Dream Leagues and so on. If kids are showing real promise, we have what we call excellence clinics, where every school brings 4 kids or sometimes 6 if we've got enough money, and they get top class coaching on that day. They get to play against kids from other schools. We assist inter-school competition, and if we get schools that are making their way, for example, to provincial competition, we support them there. And if they go to the national championships in netball, for example, we'll support them with that as well. We have a school from a place called Kwambonambi, which is just north of Richards Bay in KZN. And Umbonambi Primary last year became the national netball champions.
Wow.
So that's fantastic. As I said, we also do a bit of athletics. We found at the beginning of the year, we couldn't get started with football and netball because they had athletics. And the schools were saying, can't you help us with athletics as well? So since we started doing that, we have 3 national champions.
Wow.
Primary schools. And the most recent of them is a young girl from a school in Meadowlands called Totomeng, young girl called Binto Kamaro, who won the under 1,300 meters and 200 meters.
Wow.
And set a national record. So it's really exciting, our main goal is to get kids playing, give every kid a chance, but where there is excellence, we support that as well. We've had one young boy signed up by Pirates, another one signed up by Sundowns.
That's great.
Yeah, and 3 by Amazulu.
So for parents who want their kids to be part of this, what do they need to do? And for those who want to assist in terms of funding so that it can get bigger and better, how do they reach you?
So this is not a thing that parents can sign their kids up to, unfortunately. We're not an academy. The way we work is we look for funders, and then we choose an area where to work. Sometimes the funders will choose the area because they've got business interest there. So, for example, we work with De Beers close to their mine in Limpopo. Sometimes we get funding from a funder who says, we don't mind where you work, just put this to good use. And when we get that money, we always go to a rural area because they don't have the businesses in the area that an urban area does. The way it works is the minimum size of a project is 8 schools. And we support a school. We never support individuals, and we don't invite people to come in and join us because we're not a club. We work solely and completely in the school system, and we do it in partnership with the Department of Basic Education. So if your kid is at a school where our project is offered, you don't have to do anything. Just say to the kid, hey, we hear there's football and netball. Don't come back with your clothes clean. We want to see that you've been playing sport.
True. All right. John, thank you very much, Ralebua, for giving us an opportunity to sit with you and to get to understand you better. Highly appreciated that.
No, thank you very much for your interest, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Dad. Former COO of SABC, former head of radio, none other than Mayor Charlotte Nambane.
When I look back at my career years, I think the time I got to thrive, the time I got to enjoy myself actually, was the time I was in radio. During those years was that programs were pre-recorded, and it's seldom that we had a live broadcast. I didn't know that later would necessarily result in me bringing about some innovation in radio.
Among the 6 stations that were falling under your portfolio, not all of them were making money.
Yes.
How were you supporting those stations that were struggling to make money for the SABC at the time?
The bottom line in most cases would have been to remember that we were a public broadcaster. We didn't manage to turn all of them around, but we improved their financial situation. At that time, there would have still been things like people paying for their TV licenses. Remember that revenue during those years. I don't know how the model has been structured now. The financial model has been structured now. But by then, obviously, those services would get a percentage as well from the payment of TV licenses.